Welcome to Mindfulness Alchemy for the Modern Soul. I'm Esther Vidic, and today my partner for this recording is Tanya Miles. And Tanya, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I would like to begin with asking you to introduce yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And please tell us and share with us what is that you do, what is that you specialize in, and
Mm-hmm.
what was the inspiration or the motivation for you to choose this path to become a naturopath?
So, my name's Tanya. I've been a naturopath in integrative oncology for over 10 years now. Becoming a naturopath was something that I think was in me from the very beginning. I used to make herb gardens right next to my mum's flower gardens, and I didn't really know because I must have been like 5 or 6 years old, so I didn't even really know what herbs were. All I knew was when I went to the nursery with my mum that I wanted the herbs. And I made myself this little garden, which was just away, like right near the shed, away from her garden. And that was my little herb garden. And yeah, it wasn't until looking back on it later that I realized that that was quite an unusual thing for, maybe I was 10, but for a 10-year-old girl to be doing and, to specifically ask for the herbs. So I think it's been in me. Um, I bought a health food store when I was 21 years old. So I moved from Sydney up to the mid north coast, and that was just a really impulsive move. I saw it online for like, I think $12,000, and I thought it would be a nice sea change. And I spent 3 years there. Um, yeah, just learning a lot, really. And then, I mean, I'd been studying Chinese medicine, so it wasn't that unusual for me to look for that. But yeah, it kind of redirected me because I knew that I loved the philosophy of Chinese medicine, but I didn't necessarily want to be an acupuncturist. And I was still
Mhm.
really drawn to her. So in the health food store, um, I realized that I wanted to dispense the liquid herbs, and I wasn't able to do that unless I was a naturopath. So I went to Southern Cross University in Lismore and started studying naturopathy. And then, yeah, graduated and did a lot of training in iridology and live blood therapy and all sorts of different modalities. And I walked into a clinic in Kirra Beach, actually, on the Gold Coast, and I just had this instant connection with the lady who owned the clinic, Katrina Ellis. And she had her own story with cancer, and she had been the head naturopath at Chiva Som over in Thailand. She had been standing out on her balcony one afternoon, probably a year into her contract there, and they were excavating a bridge over in Thailand. And the practice was to bury all of the Agent Orange containers from the Vietnam War underneath buildings over there. So they were excavating a bridge and they'd pierced these containers, and she'd inhaled the Agent Orange. A year later, her stomach blew up and she had ovarian cancer. And then she went on her own journey to heal her own cancer. I think she did one round of chemotherapy, and it was probably effective to some degree, but she felt like it was killing her. So she said no more, and she went on her own journey with herbs and supplements, and has now been cancer free for like 30 years or something like that. And it was an aggressive ovarian cancer. So it's pretty remarkable what she did. And yeah, I walked into that clinic and had this instant connection with her and started sitting in on her consults. And then I started practicing and I stayed with her for over 7 years. And yeah, learned so much from her. And I worked as a head naturopath at Gaia Retreat in Byron, and that was owned by Liv and Newton John. So that had quite a strong cancer focus as well. And it was a COVID time, actually, during COVID years, that I wasn't able to cross the New South Wales Queensland border. I live in Queensland, so I
Mm.
couldn't go to Gaia anymore. So I had a little bit of time just predominantly just treating thyroid conditions and things like that. And then met Dr. Carol Haddad of Integrative Cancer Care Australia and started working with an integrative oncologist. And she'd worked for the Hippocrates Center and worked over in Colorado, and she'd done all these amazing things. So yeah, I continue to learn from her and other really amazing integrative doctors like Dr. Joachim Flura, and he does these amazing exacta molecular profiling of tumors. So he's just a wealth of information for me, and yeah, such a beautiful man. Yeah, many other integrative doctors who've influenced the journey as well. And then the other thing that I do is I work for Enki Apothecary down in Dalesford, and I'm a naturopath for them, and I help with their training. I'm training naturopaths. So they make spagyric herbal medicines, and that was a really really interesting journey. When I was working at Endeavour College, which is a naturopathic college, many years ago, got handed a book, probably 10 years at least before I actually met Jesse in person, who owns the Enki Apothecary in Dalesford. And he handed me the spagyric medicine by Manfred Junius. So I'd read that about 10 years before. I knew that there was something really, really special about these medicines. And I connected with Jesse probably 10 years later, and he was planning to create this spagyric lab. And he'd already started making spagyric medicines when I met him, but we kind of drifted apart for a while, and he moved from the Northern Rivers back down to Dalesford. And then while I was doing the cancer work, I reconnected with him, and he'd already created this amazing biodynamic farm, spagyric lab, like everything that I'd ever imagined creating. He'd created all of it, plus things that I couldn't ever even dream of. So I cried when I walked onto his farm, and when he brought me down there. And yeah, ever since I've just been, just connected to Enki and their medicines. And they're really fascinating for me because I had started kind of with a cancer patient. I really need to have really potent medicines that work really fast, because working with cancer patients, particularly stage 4 cancers where it's metastatic, you're on a ticking clock. Like you don't know how much time you've got to resolve the cancer. So I kind of started to go towards more pharmaceutical medicines, and because I needed the potency, and I wasn't getting that potency from freeze-dried extracts, herbal extracts that are from the health food stores or from iHerb or any of those places, and they just weren't strong enough. And I'd kind of gravitated to using off-label drugs and metformin and doxycycline and all these really aggressive off-label drugs to treat cancer, because I was seeing them work, sure, but like chemotherapy and like radiation, they come with a lot of collateral damage to the gut microbiome and the tissues in the body. And then I tried the Enki frankincense, and it was really such a game changer. Like, frankincense is an anti-inflammatory medicine, and inflammation is a big part of cancer. And I just was getting the most amazing results with clients. And then I expanded into all of the mushroom extracts as well. A lot of the mushrooms have specific affinities for certain cancers. So I gravitated towards those. And I think most of my cancer clients now will get at least the frankincense and turkey tail, reishi, or chaga, or cordyceps. So that's my journey up until we met in the Enki training session, and here we are today.
You are amazing. I mean, I clocked it the first time I had the pleasure of meeting you, and your journey is very inspiring, to be honest. And you had so many experiences, but also what I noticed when I first had the pleasure of meeting you and talking with you is that you have this beautiful, genuine care for people. And it's really coming from, a beautiful, special place when you do genuinely care. And that was the first thing I went like, wow, she's really impressive. So I'm so glad you're here today. And then I have a chance to ask a couple of questions from you. And let's dive into these questions. And my very first question is this. Let's talk about our daily lives and the daily grind as modern humans. And
Mm-hmm.
in your opinion and experience, and what is your observation really? What are the biggest challenges we face as modern human beings? And what can we do to navigate life better? How can we look after our mental, emotional, and physical bodies better?
I think the biggest challenge that we're facing is how busy and how stressed we are. The stress response keeps us in this constant fight or flight, cell danger response, and we never really get a chance to repair our tissues and repair on a cellular level. I don't think we get enough sleep, and we're always rushing, and that keeps us in this constant catabolic state. So we're always breaking down tissue and we're never really repairing or having the time to repair. It's either fight or flight, or you're in rest and digest when you can actually repair. And we're very rarely in rest and digest, even when we eat. We're running around and we're just like throwing down food at lunchtime in a 15-minute window, no time to digest it, and we're eating it in a stress state. And I think that is definitely something that is driving a lot of issues for people. The other thing would be the soil quality. So the demineralization of the soil. So the way that our food is grown, it's grown in toxic, demineralized soil. So commercial crops, monocrops, that the soil is not looked after, the integrity of the soil. So we're using pesticides, drowning our crops in pesticides, and then ingesting those. The glyphosates, the toxins that come from that. We know glyphosates can they can definitely stimulate breast cancer cell growth in parts per trillion. So you only need a little bit of glyphosate, and we're literally drowning in it. So the glyphosate issue is doing further damage to our already compromised digestive systems. The pesticide companies will say, we don't have a shikimate pathway, so that the glyphosates can't do us damage. But all of the bacteria living in our gut has a shikimate pathway, which means that those glyphosates that we're ingesting with our food all of the time are shutting down the shikimate pathway in all of those bacteria. It's affecting amino acid pathways. So it's affecting our DNA and the expression of our DNA. So I think environmental toxins are huge. Stress is probably number one, because stress will deplete a lot of those minerals that you need to be able to deal with that toxin load. And the increased toxin load is the other thing, I think, is probably the two major issues. And then I think just that lack of this linear kind of way of looking at things. And one thing that I teach my kids to do is compost, because it's teaching that cyclic nature and you're giving back to the earth. And that's what's missing in conventional farming, is you're not completing the cycle. You're just always taking and taking, exploiting, and you're not really conscious of putting back. So I think, they're the main issues that we're facing. And a lot of the chronic health issues that I see come from not having enough minerals in your body because they're no longer in our food. So the minerals themselves are the foundation that you need. So you have your DNA, and your DNA codes for all of these enzymes in your body that perform all these different actions in your body. But if you don't have the minerals, like you don't have the selenium to produce your body's major antioxidant glutathione, then you're not going to be producing your major antioxidant. And if there's no selenium in the soil and you're not supplementing with it, you're using up a lot of selenium to produce a lot of glutathione to deal with all these environmental toxins. So it's just like this. Yeah, it's we're spiraling into this place that interestingly enough, it was meeting Jesse from Enki and him introducing me to biodynamic farming and diving right into a 40-year study that they did over in Europe that tracks conventional, organic, and a biodynamic farm. And they looked at the microbiome of the soil, the nutrients in the soil. And what they found was that the biodynamic farming was actually going and repairing the soil and taking it back to that pristine micro, even going beyond and making it better over a 40-year period. And it was a bell curve where the first few years you didn't notice much, and then it was exponential growth in the microbiome and the mineral content of the soil. So I think that as much as we've got all these problems, we actually have real solutions. And biodynamic farming to me, before I met Jesse from Enki, sounded, even though weirdly enough, I'd met a lady in Bellingen who I'd studied anthroposophical Steiner-based medicines with, biodynamic farming to me just seemed, I just couldn't see the relevance for me because I had all these other things in my brain, I think. And then when Jesse kind of explained it to me as the solution to all of these environmental crisis issues that we're having in the world, I was just completely hooked. And it really drew me in to the point where, I've been studying it myself now and implementing some of those things myself now and trying to grow biodynamically. So, yeah, I think as much as we've got all these issues, we've also got the solutions to them as well. So, yeah, does that answer
That's
the question?
yes, thank you. I was in deep thought and I was just nodding along because the first time I ever heard about biodynamic farming was also through the Rudolf Steiner philosophy. And they have these schools and whatever, and they have these little practices. And the first time I heard from someone, she was explaining to me that you have to bury I don't know, the tusk or the horn of a dead something, and you have to put blood in the soil. And I went like, wow, that sounds wild and crazy. But at that point I went like, okay, it kind of makes sense. Like, you're trying to, nature would take that. So if we didn't have cemeteries or whatever, and we were unga bunga cave people, right, and we would die under a tree, then mother nature would repurpose everything and we would be taken, like everything, and the soul would go where the soul goes and the body would return to mother earth. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think one of our, that's my observation, one of the biggest challenges we have at the moment is that because we live in houses and we wear factory made clothing and we eat factory farm stuff, we consider ourselves not being part of the ecosystem. But if we
Mm-hmm.
took away the houses, and we had to do that, we are very much part of the ecosystem. We are very much part of the system at large. But that's my
Mm-hmm.
take on, astrology as well. When someone says like, "Oh, I don't believe in astrology," well, sweetie, astrology doesn't believe in you. It doesn't mean that it doesn't apply. Or when we look at, the Schumann resonance, or
Yeah.
we look at, sun activity, and you go like, sweetheart, you haven't been sleeping for 3 nights because the Schumann was off the charts, and it does affect us all. And another beautiful thing that you said is that we we live in a society and our conditioning is very much take, 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 take. What benefits
Mm,
me? What serves me? The world owes me stuff. And thank God there are a lot of lovely people who think about giving back, because it has
mm,
to be, it's a give and take. We have to look after the environment so the environment doesn't kill us. We have to look after each other and other
mm.
people. We can't exploit other people, because that will lead to awful toxic relationships. And if you believe in the concept of karma, then you're kind of stuffed. So,
Yeah.
as you said, the solutions, we just need to be open minded and open hearted. And, looking back at ancient wisdom or the people who
Mm,
came before us, um,
mm.
let's go back and look at it, because there's a lot of stuff in there that we could use that wasn't silly or stupid or superstitious, but it's actually
And
something that we would need.
absolutely. And when it comes to, and I think that was my aversion initially to to biodynamics, was that there was cow horns and sheep splatters and all of these kind of things that weren't as mystical and as enticing as astrological star constellations and things like that. But when you look into what you're actually doing with the cow horn, is you're inoculating the soil. So it's almost like giving a probiotic to the soil. And then having these studies that have been going for the last 40 years to prove that that one, cow horn will inoculate large areas of soil, and homeopathic preparations where you're putting preparations that are in homeopathic doses into the soil will remineralize the soil. And we now have the science to say that it's not some crazy, basically Steiner presented to a bunch of farmers who were just inquiring to him about how do we restore the soil. And he just downloaded all of this information that we had no idea that, all of these years in the future now, that science was going to validate everything that he spoke about, as weird as it sounded, cow horns and all the weird things that had kind of not been as attractive as astrology to me with biodynamic farming. But now that I understand that it's being validated with really high level science, that it's really effective, and not just effective, but he was giving us this gift of how to fix all of these environmental issues that we're having now. It was almost prophetic. A lot of his work was almost prophetic in its nature, and the information that he gave, and how much of it now is still considered a little bit like esoteric. Or, I was reading a book on mistletoe last night, and mistletoe is used and sold over the counter in German pharmacies, and it's used as an immune stimulator, but also is cytotoxic to cancer cells. You can literally in a German pharmacy, in a German hospitals where integrative care is standard of care, unlike Australia where particularly integrative cancer care is something that you can't really do. You can do with an integrative doctor, but you can't do with an integrative oncologist because they don't exist here. Oncology is very tight. But over in Germany, where they really had taught this like more Steiner philosophy about the spirit and the soul of the person, and Steiner education too includes the spirit and the soul of the child, and you're taking that into consideration. And I think saying that everywhere in the planet is devoid of this is probably not accurate, because it does exist in certain places, and definitely those areas in Europe that have been very influenced by Steiner and a lot of those similar prophetic philosophers and writers and things like that. I think that the world is seen a little different. Education's seen a little bit differently. Farming's seen differently. Medicine's seen differently. And I think that rather than see it as being different and kind of being repelled by it, We just need to really kind of dive into it. And the mistletoe book that I'm reading was partly written by Nasha Winters. And Nasha Winters she wrote about the metabolic approach to cancer, and really she kind of was one of the first people to dive into Thomas Seyfried's work, a Yale scientist and researcher who got us to see cancer as a metabolic condition rather than a genetic disease. So we had power over it. And yeah, she was writing because the Johns Hopkins Hospital did a study now in mistletoe, and they're proving that it is really effective, and it should be something that we use in cancer treatment. And it's not weird. It's anthroposophical, and it's Steiner, and those philosophies are a little bit weird to Australian doctors and biodynamics to Australian farmers, because we don't understand that soul spirit level. And if you go into that level, instead of seeing it as normal, we see it as, oh, it's hippie, or it's weird, or it's whatever. But it's actually what's needed, I think, on the planet, to come back to that holistic way of seeing human beings, and holistic way of seeing the farm, and holistic way of practicing medicine. And we can learn a lot, I think, from the way that it's done in Europe, for sure.
Very,
Particularly
very,
in
very much so. And I remember, so I studied nursing. It was a very different educational system. So the last 2 years of high school, we studied some nursing aspects. And I remember the very first thing that we were shown is a triangle. The psychosomatic diseases, and like there's the body and the mind and the soul, and when like, then what's missing? Like, if we teach that to students, somewhere along the line we kind of lose this. And yes, we are very much, there's the body, and there's the spirit, and there's the soul. And that is a great segue to take us to our next thing, because I have something for you, and then I have a really awesome question that I would love you to answer. So here we go. Body, spirit, and the soul. We have it, and plants have it. And that takes us to plant intelligence. And in a moment, I would love you to please explain plant intelligence in a way that anyone can understand it. But here is something I came across the other day, and I thought, I'm going to write this down, and I'm gonna tell this to Tanya. So here we go. It was a story about a special oil, as in, think in terms of like a perfume oil, right? So we are talking about essential oils, and obviously we are talking about, beautiful, organic, not synthetic. And there's an oil called chameleon oil. And apparently the chameleon oil was a lady's oil. And so it's basically, it didn't say in what amount each component was added to it to create the oil. It just says it contains sandalwood, it contains rose, and it contains frankincense. And it said that the intelligence of the plants preserved in the oils act as a personal energy diagnostic tool. And so if a woman needs grounding, then the warmth of the sandalwood come forward. If she needs to nurture her feminine, then there be the rose coming forward. And if she needs confidence, then the spicy fieriness of the frankincense will come forward. Is it possible, you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that when we go and we try on perfumes, because they will evolve with us. So a perfume smell on one person is different to how it will smell on another person, because of that intelligence within the oils. When you're talking about the intelligence of a plant, you are really, yes, it's the whole plant, but concentrated in the terpenes and the essential oils is that a lot of the therapeutic potential of the plant. It's a lot of the the soul of the plant, the individual nature of the plant, is definitely contained in the oils of the plant. And a lot of those resins, essential oils, absolutes that are used in perfumery are exactly that. It's the soul of the plant. And you experience the soul of the plant like rose when you smell the rose, because the terpenes are creating that smell. It's the essential oils that are creating, and the volatiles that are creating the smell. So it is very much a big part of the intelligence of the plant. So I completely agree with that. I think it's a beautiful story about exactly how plants work as well, because you actually communicating on a chemical level with them, and we know that the way that the plant constituents or compounds interact with our own body, we map that and we show that you can give somebody ashwagandha or frankincense or whatever plant it is, then they have this intelligence to upregulate, downregulate. It's almost like they turn different levers for different people, because they are interacting almost like a consciousness. And they have a consciousness and an intelligence, as do we. And they have a personality, and they have, this nervous system. Plants feel things. We know that. There was a really old book, Tompkinson, I think. And what he did was he got plants and he got a device to measure the nervous system response of the plant. And it's kind of awful study actually. Now I'm actually speaking it out loud, but he would actually have plants next to each other, and then he would maybe hurt one of the plants and the other ones would see it and like chop its leaf or something like that. And then every time he would walk into the room, or whoever the person was who committed that or did that act, the plants would instantly get stressed and their nervous system would be stressed. And then somebody else who didn't hurt them, who perhaps watered them or did something beautiful for them, they didn't get stressed, and they didn't have that same response. So plants have an intelligence, and there's been, many people over the years who've definitely measured that. Then you've got those machines that will actually they will measure the song of the plant, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you go down to Crystal Castle here, down in Byron Bay, or in the the Northern Rivers kind of area, and you can hear the songs of the plant. They have that device attached to each plant. And then if you go to South America, into certain regions in the Amazon, and you see the fabrics, and they have the different songs of the plant woven into the fabrics. And a lot of the Icarus, which are the songs of the plants that the shamanic healers will sing into the body of people, are taught to them by the plants. So there is this beautiful intelligence that works in the plant that we can measure now. Like, it's not just somebody who's taken ayahuasca and thought that they could speak to plants. We actually can measure it. We have these devices to show that each plant has its own individual song and vibration, as we do. And they have their own consciousness that interacts with our consciousness. But in order for that to happen, it has to be able to communicate with us. So the reason that essential oils are great when you're just acting through the limbic system and you're smelling them, because that's how you're able to get that effect, a consciousness altering effect, because you're smelling it. So you're actually like kind of ingesting it that way, or through the skin. But in order to get that like systemic communication and get the whole plant to communicate with you on that kind of level, where you're going to get the terpenes cross the blood-brain barrier to interact with different areas in the brain, you can't just do that with let's say, reishi, for example. You can have a reishi powder and it's got this beautiful immune response at a gut level. If you take the beta glucans from most mushrooms, have a particular type of beta glucans, and they will interact with the immune system through their ability to interact with the gut wall, and they'll signal to the immune system from the gut wall. But to get that real consciousness altering Shen spirit tonic that the old Taoist masters spoke about when they spoke about reishi, you need to get all of the terpenes and all of the aromatics, the essential oils of the plant, which is the soul of the plant. You need to have that in there as well. So when you do that, and then you also have that combined with the minerals, then you're setting up this level of bioavailability, but also you've extracted and recombined to make a spagyric up to 95% of the compounds that existed in the plant, maybe more, up to 98% of those plants. So it's almost like a mirror of what exists in nature. But when you get a powdered herb or an extract that you're buying in capsules from iHerb, you might be extracting 35% of those compounds from the plant. So you're not getting that full plant communication, consciousness altering effect that you're going to get when you have the spirit, the soul, and the body of the plant all in that one tincture or one remedy. And then that's able to cross the membranes. The minerals allow that facilitation, and the way that they interact with those essential oils allows this systemic delivery of this plant and systemic delivery of 95% of the plant. So when you have a spagyric reishi or a spagyric frankincense or whatever other spagyric that you want to extract in that way, you're going to get this systemic consciousness altering full body effect. So it's interacting with your spirit, soul, and body. So you're able to get the mineral messages, which are the star signature. Minerals are just the explosion of stars, and then they deposit in the soil, and then they're taken up by the plants and the mushrooms. And when you have those, they've got this archetypal signature. And most of the herbs that we get, unless you have that triple extraction process that you have with spagyric triple extraction, you're just tincturing. So you're throwing away after you tincture and get all the alkaloids and interact with that spirit of the plant. You throw away the body of the plant, and the volatiles have just kind of escaped in that process, or mostly escaped after you pick them. So once you pick a plant, within a week, you've lost most of the volatiles anyway. So most of the essentials are gone. So when you smell like, I don't know if you've ever had a really good peppermint tea that still has all of the aromatics, and then you have something you bought from Coles or Woolworths and it barely smells like peppermint. You get the tannins and you get a very different flavor, but then you get a really fresh peppermint and you're like, oh, because it's been picked and it's been dried and it's fresh, and it hasn't been sitting in a warehouse for months on end storing. It's actually like the fresh plant, and it's still got some of those aromatics intact, and they haven't been destroyed by freeze drying and powdering and those sorts of things. So there is definitely a consciousness in plants that we can measure to some degree and interact with, and it's a felt experience for sure once you start interacting with different plant spirits, whether you do it through the big power plants like the ones in the Amazon and places like that, on a really subtle level with just some chamomile and you just feel, or lavender when you smell it, or the freshness of pine when you walk in nature, and the way it makes you feel. Like, we know that it's changing something, and we're interacting with a different consciousness because it's shifting our consciousness. Similar to when you meet an angry person, you walk away and you're like, oh, I feel a bit anxious and uptight, and you feel their presence, or you meet someone who's just really serene and calm and beautiful, and you just walk away feeling better from the experience. Same with you, and when you interact with different plants, you definitely, something happens and it shifts your consciousness. And even if you just think about the felt experience and the science isn't relevant to you, you're experiencing the consciousness of the plants when they do that, and they have their own personality, they have their own feeling and dimensions that, yeah, we can definitely work with and get to know. So yeah, I do think plants have a consciousness. Absolutely, I think it's undeniable.
I love it. And you said so many interesting things. The peppermint and the tea brewing. I do grow peppermint in my little backyard, and I even made a blog post about the mindfulness of slow processes. And I was
Mm,
talking about like growing your own tea herbs. I'm very big on mindfulness gardening. I think it's beautiful, and you can do little things like I've got chamomile and I've got peppermint, as well as a couple of edible stuff. But it's very beautiful. And yes, it's a completely different experience, as you said, to brew something fresh. um, and I also believe that it's not just that the plants have intelligence, but I'm a strong believer that plants, herbs, and
mm,
especially, herbs that we use for healing, right? That
mm,
they are God given. They are given to us as tools to keep ourselves well and healthy. And there's a beautiful
mhm.
story, and I absolutely believe that is true. It comes from a man who's no longer with us, and he was lecturing a lot about this kind of stuff, plant intelligence, and the connectedness that we should nurture with our environment. And he said that
Mm,
in times in villages when the medicine men used to come around from village to village, and
yeah.
he knew what the villagers needed in that particular village in times when they were using like the outdoor toilet, the dunny, because
Mm,
everything went in the ground. And at the edge of the village, the
mhm.
plants that they needed, the herbs they needed would pop up. So he would go there, he would collect it, and then go to the village and be able to help the people in the village.
Yeah.
And I think it's a
Yeah.
beautiful story. And I personally believe that it's not just a story, that is really how it works. It's very
I,
fascinating. And I have a lot of respect, and I love Enki. I love Enki products. I've been using them for years. It's been life changing, game changers.
mhm.
Exactly because of that, because it's not a cheap way of destroying the plant and just getting something out of it, but it's honoring the plant and
Mhm.
honoring the gift that plant is. And
Mhm.
I think it's absolutely wonderful to keep that in mind. And it also forces us to keep our minds open, that we are not
Mm,
just physical in our bodies, that we have
mm.
the energetic system, and we know, and it's scientifically proven even, that our hearts produce a toric field. So that's
Yeah.
why we can feel someone's energy from a mile away. And then
Yeah.
some situation you go like, oh, I really can't stand that person. And you don't know why, because they look okay, they don't smell, they don't look, disheveled, and you just go like, no, I don't wanna stay in that person's energy. And with other people
Yeah.
you go like, it feels like I've known you forever, actually.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's a it's a beautiful thing. So, speaking of spiritual connections and plant
Mm,
intelligence, let's talk a little bit about sacred moments in our lives. But
mm.
let me phrase it this way. In your opinion and experience,
Yeah.
mindfulness,
Mhm.
routines that we have, rituals we have, spiritual and energetic hygiene we have in our lives. Why is it
Mm.
so important for anybody? Why is it so important for modern men and women, of course? What role it really plays in maintaining our well-being and overall well-being, the whole self? What is your take on that?
So when it comes to the rituals that we perform every day, I think you're tapping into what science wants to call the placebo effect. It's a measurable effect that we have. We don't know what the placebo effect is. We know that we can give two people, so one gets a placebo, which is something that doesn't have the medicine in it. You can give another person the actual medicine, and those two people can have the same response, especially if they think that they're getting not the placebo. That power of the mind will create the effect. So ritual might come down to my personal rituals that I have is I have an altar in my house, and the altar it's got all of the things that are really special to me. It has pictures of my children, letters written to me from my children. When I go to the altar and I perform my rituals, I'll often use different. Like I have this beautiful tribe earth incense that I buy from Western Australia, and it's got lots of beautiful Australian plant, like Australian sandalwood and different wildcrafted incenses, and I'll burn those. And I think that when it comes to the volatile essences and the communication that you're setting up through those rituals, they're facilitated by combining your intention and working with the plants and working with the volatile aspect of the plants, the parts of the plants like the essential oils that kind of exist between matter and spirit, and they're very easily, like, volatile is for a reason. It's very volatile. Quickly they will kind of, disperse into the environment, into the ether. And when they are crossing, and I call it crossing the veil, what they're carrying is, well, more, yes, sometimes I'll speak it, but more it's like my heart intentions that I'm sending with those volatile oils or aromatics that I'm using, that will help to carry my prayers or my intentions across the veil to the ancestral, to the spirit, like whatever you want to call it, communicating with the universe on that level. I think those rituals, even without the volatile aromatics that I use in my daily practice, I think are still very powerful. We know that from placebo effects and what happens with that when you put your intention. Like, you can create real healing and change, and you can alter the fabric of the universe with your intentions. And if anyone has ever worked in that level, you will you'll get experiences like that where they're too synchronous and too weird to not think that somehow you've brought that experience into your field, or that you've sensed that it's coming by aligning with it. Maybe it's a premonition that gets delivered to you in that moment. So in that, is it your desire or is it the premonition being? But either way, it's that you're setting up in these moments of ritual and prayer and devotion. You're setting up communication with the divine. So whether you're becoming aware of the divine intention for us, or you're creating a divine intention for you and getting the divine to facilitate it with you, there's something magical that happens there through that ritual practice. And I've, over my lifetime, I've experienced it. And I know many other people, when you speak about that magic of synchronicities in their life and magic of intention, and working with the volatile plant essences as well. I have this one really amazing thing that happened when I was working for a skincare company called Avoe, and we did this beautiful training session out in Bonogan, in the hinterland on the Gold Coast. And we had this guy from Melbourne turn up, and he didn't really fit the whole women's skincare kind of picture. And we're all kind of like, what are you doing here? But we just kind of all went with it. And during the time we did this meditation, and there was lots of like plant spirit kind of medicine rituals happening, and we were doing this meditation, and he picked up this flute that no one could really play. You had to be like a really special kind of musician to be able to play this flute. And he just played it so beautifully that every woman in the room was just in tears. It was just the most beautiful sound. And we're like, how did you do that? And he said, so after his auntie, who was this amazing musician, passed away, he picked up, he used to smell patchouli come into the room, and she always used to wear patchouli before she passed. And then as she came into the room, he was able to pick up instruments and not know what he was doing, but just play them. And ever since she passed, he was able to do this. And he knows when he's able to do it because he can smell the patchouli. And once he smells the patchouli, he knows that he's going to be able to play that instrument. And we were just like, but it's that story stayed with me for years after, of that powerful kind of like the patchouli particularly, because not only was the patchouli and the volatiles that we're sending from this kind of side of the veil across with our prayers, but also like the ancestral, or if we're open maybe, or who knows why he could smell the patchouli and maybe we don't, or they're beyond perception or something. But maybe some of these aromatics are coming from beyond the veil, and maybe the plants themselves is that expression of the oils. Maybe that's the divine part of them that's coming through. I don't know that. There's no science to prove that, but it's still a really beautiful story. And I witnessed it, and I heard his story, and it just, yeah, the way he played the flute in that moment, and the way that it touched every single woman's heart in that room, and then also him telling that story just landed as such a truth, and it stayed with me every time I do my rituals now and think about that communication between this realm and whatever this ether, or crossing the veil, and those experiences we have of crossing the veil at different times in our life, whether it's through meditation or through our dreams, or plant medicines, or whatever it is. Like there's a lot of people who've experienced that beyond the veil kind of experiences in different ways. So yeah, it's really, really interesting ritual and belief in it as well. I think there has to be it has to be that real heart emotional connection with your intention to be able to get those kind of impacts. You can't really do it from a mind level. And it's almost like, and I read the other day actually, it was Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley, the writer who
Yes.
Brave New World, and he was saying that that the brain itself is more like the way that it works is all this busyness of the brain is actually distracting us from the real nature of reality. And it's actually like a lot of the psychedelic plants, when they communicate, they're actually turning off areas of the brain. And I think people use that to say, oh, well, we're shutting down the brain. So we're obviously like, it's not working. But what you do when you shut down parts of the brain is you allow these other organs of perception to kick in. And I think that there's real evidence now to show that we're seeing more of reality when we quieten our brain and stop that filtering that happens through the brain and step into that heart space and open to that on that level. And through meditation, like that's what you're doing. You're stopping your thoughts, and then stopping the thoughts and quietening the mind enables this other level of perception. So I think slowing down, like you were saying, is opening and getting us to see more of reality rather than less.
Absolutely. You just blew my mind because I heard that story a couple of weeks ago on a
Mm-hmm.
podcast that was, one of these like spooky stories from Reddit or whatever. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that story with the guy playing the flute and the patchouli, when you were saying it, I went like, I can't believe that. What a synchronicity. There we go.
Well,
But
I
it
think
is,
that lots of people have that experience, Like I think that lots of people have had that experience of smelling or having something moved in the house. Like after people pass, I know that my mum's best friend, when she passed, her daughter went back to the home that no one had been in, and there was a book on grief taken out of the bookshelf and laid down, and she was the only person with keys to the house. So knows what happens, you know, between those two, those. Yeah, I think when you're close to birth and death, when you step, I mean, I am with my work a lot, so I hear these stories a lot from my clients because they're at that threshold point. So they're looking at really potentially crossing over. And in another clinic that I do some work for in Sugar Newer Natural Health, there is fertility, and you hear those stories during birthing, the different kind of experiences that women have when they cross the threshold and they step beyond the veil. And then also with cancer patients when they're facing their own mortality, and these real, like, yeah, profound experiences start happening to them. So yeah, it's not strange for me to hear it with the type of work that I do.
I had one of those crossing the threshold experiences while I was giving birth. And that was the most That's not the first experience I had. I've been an experiencer all my life since childhood. So I'm very much, open to it, and to me it is real. And I'm fascinated by it. My experience was that a voice I know from childhood, which is not my inner chatter. So we can look, I can be a massive skeptic and I go like, okay, let's have a look at the scientific explanations before I call it woo-woo, and I go with that. But a voice I know from childhood said to me, I find myself in the middle of, I guess it was crowning, probably, that's the threshold when it's the most painful and you're about to die. That's literally death then and there. And so I find myself in a rainforest. And I looked up and it was very, very tall trees, and I could just see the beautiful blue sky. And that voice said to me, I want you to walk with me. And I remember experiencing the moisture in the air in the forest. And I took a couple of steps. And the next thing was that I hear the midwife asking, would you like to hold your baby? And
Oh
that was such
wow.
a beautiful experience. So I absolutely believe that there is a lot more to this. We are here in the physical body, yes, but we were given so many tools: the plants, herbs, herbal medicine, crystals, sound, the power of sound and sound healing, like singing bowls and certain frequencies can do wonders for us. and
Yeah.
and that's thank you for sharing your story as well, because it is beautiful, and I hope that with my work and your work and so many other people who do stuff like us, is that we can encourage more and more people to do not be afraid. Quiet your mind and open your heart, because there's such beautiful magic happening around us and within us every single day. We just need to be able to tap into it, and also
Yeah.
quiet the noise of our society, of the outside world, of the constant busyness, because the
Yeah.
healing and the magic is happening within.
And it's that belief that being more busy, you're going to achieve more as well. I think it's like a bit of the delusion of society is that the busier you are, the more you're going to achieve. But actually, it's when you slow down that you see more of reality. And I find that myself. And I remember going to this man just the day. It was weird timing because it was the day before COVID, and I was going 100 mile an hour, working 6 days a week in clinic, seeing probably six patients a day back to back, and it was kind of that real, I don't know, like maybe 20s, 30s, like ego time of my life where everything's external. And I was expecting, this healing or whatever. And he sat me down at a table and he got me to read a sentence and tell me how many S's were in the sentence. And I read it 100 miles an hour and maybe counted two. And he was like, slow down and read it again and tell me how many S's. And I was like, oh, I missed one. Yeah, there's three. And then he was like, now I want you to really slow down and breathe. And he taught me how to breathe. And he was like, slow down. And I read it again and maybe I got five that time. And by the time I actually really slowed down, there was six S's. And he said to me, you're in clinic going at that speed and you missed 80% of reality because of the speed that you were going at. And if you slow down, and how do you think that's safe for your clients, is what he said to me. And I was like, no, I do not. And he said, if you slow down, you're going to see 100% of reality. And that's actually going to be in greater service to the clients that you see than this hyped up adrenaline state that you are thinking being a high achiever and all the things. You think you're achieving more and seeing more, but you're actually missing 80% of reality because of the pace that you're living your life at. So I think it's, the importance of slowing down so you can see the whole of reality is so important. And we're fed this delusion by the school system or by our conditioning and society that we need to be busy, and we almost wear it like a badge of honor when you're like, how are you? Been so busy, and it's like, oh, well, great, you've been busy, you've been productive. And it's like, well, actually, not necessarily that pace that you're going at is actually, not allowing you to see everything. And you're missing so much going at that fast pace that we all seem to be traveling at. And there's that different dimensions of time, I think. And there's that linear, but then there's the depth of the experience. And you can go in that linear kind of version of time, but you're going to miss this other dimension, which is the depth of life and the soul that you miss if you want to reduce life to that. So it's really important to slow down.
It's the moments as well. There was a beautiful Buddhist story, and the student was walking with the master, and they were taking a walk together, and la la la, and they get to the end of the walk, and then the student says like, "But you haven't said anything to me, like anything wise, like what's going on? I haven't learned anything today." And the master turned to the student and said, "So how many fallen leaves have you counted, or how many leaves falling have you observed on our walk?" And so there, it's really, if we are rushing and running and glorifying busy, then we are running half deaf, half blind. And it really is, we are severing the connection from other people as well as from what is actually happening, because we weren't designed for this. Human beings weren't designed for this either, or the doom scrolling. If you think about it, when you scroll so fast on an entertainment platform, it doesn't even allow you that 90 seconds that is required for an emotion to pass through the system. So you're sad, you're angry, you're sad, you're angry, and whatever. And then you go like, yeah, of course you can't move, and just you have to veg out on the sofa. And, you need constant background noise because you cannot be alone with your being. And that, I think, it's very dangerous. So as you said, prayer, meditation, rituals, mindfulness. And if anyone ever says to me, and I hear that so often, I don't have the time for it. I don't know how you do it. I don't have the time for it. Honey, no one has the time. We make the time. And, with meditation as well, like you should meditate every day. Oh, but I'm busy. Oh, then you should meditate twice.
Agreed.
Sim-
Very much.
Simple as
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
listen, we are at the top of the hour, so one more question, if I may. And I would love to I would love to empower everyone, obviously, but I love empowering women. I'm a woman, you're a very wise woman, and you're a very knowledgeable woman. So I would love to talk about womanhood. And I would
Mm,
love to talk about perimenopause and menopause and hormonal changes. And I would
mm-hmm.
love to talk about with you about aging and absolutely unattainable and damaging beauty standards. And
Mm-hmm.
I would love your take and opinion and your wisdom on what can we do as women to
Yeah.
love ourselves more and to be able to embrace the process of aging. What can we do? What's your take on it? What's your experience? Please do share.
So I'm 45, so I'm definitely going through those initial changes of perimenopause now. So it's been a lot of theoretical knowledge up until now, as in, this 20-year-old naturopath or 30-year-old naturopath trying to communicate with perimenopausal women was a little bit difficult, I think. And now the actual experience of it and the realness of it now, I think I can speak from a place of real knowing. And um, I think you definitely notice a collagen shift. So once you hit 40, your estrogen starts to drop. So you're not producing as much collagen. So you do notice more fine lines and more wrinkles. And yeah, it's definitely starting to change. I think the decline in estrogen, and it doesn't need to be so painful for us. Like perimenopause and that transition is actually, I heard it described by Randine Lewis, who's this beautiful acupuncturist, as like we up until we hit menopause and while we're still cycling, our energy is anchored down in our ovarian kind of reserve. So we have this triangle where spirit is here, but we're anchored down in the physical. And then as that ovarian reserve starts to run out, the triangle shifts and we start to open and we start to receive more information, and we become those wise women. And it's a process, and as our energy recalibrates, and basically it's a recalibration that we're going through. Some people describe it as like a second puberty. um, we know that our brain completely changes. It's recalibration. And I like to see it like that, as it, and I've noticed it myself. Like I've noticed the quality of my dreams is a lot different to the dreams that I used to have, when I was in my more like fertile years, for sure. And that recalibration mostly is so painful, is the reason is because when our ovarian reserve runs out, and our brain senses this, and we get our hypothalamus and pituitary start to kind of whip our ovaries because they want one more cycle, because there's this strong survival, energy that comes through nature. So it's a very biochemical process as much as it's a spiritual process. So it's trying to, the ovarian reserve's running out, your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone is starting to go up because it's trying to release eggs and there's very few left. So you're going through that. And then what's supposed to happen is that you're supposed to transition at this time from your ovaries producing your estrogen to your adrenals. So your DHEA is your mother hormone, and that is produced by the adrenal glands. And the DHEA converts into androstenedione and testosterone, and then in our fat cells, it aromatases into our estrogen. So that is how we compensate for the ovarian reserve kind of running out now, and the production of estrogen that our ovaries are producing is now declining. But the problem is that we're so busy that by the time we get to our 40s, our adrenals are so depleted. So one of the first things that women will experience is like vaginal dryness and the vaginal atrophy, and they have to use like lots of different lubrication and things like that because they're just not able to produce or even that the walls, the thinning of the lining of the vagina becomes quite thin. And that only happens if you've got low DHEA. So it only happens to women who are completely adrenally exhausted at that age. And who's not going to be adrenally exhausted when they're raising children, working full time, looking after their families, trying to function, be a high functioning woman in this world is, we're all trying to be Wonder Woman. It's like, it's very taxing. So we're making this transition without the energy reserves that we need to reach that or cross that threshold. And we get all of these symptoms, and most of them are coming from low progesterone, not balancing our estrogen, and then our estrogen drops, and we're not able to compensate because our adrenals are so exhausted. So, I mean, you can, and there's a lot of plant medicines that every different initiation that women go through in our lifetime, there's a plant medicine that's going to support you and hold you through that time, whether it's childbirth or menstruation, cycling, those sorts of things, or menopause. And different plants will hold you at different phases of menopause, depending on whether you need the adrenal support or you need to lift your progesterone or whatever it is that you need to do. There's plants that are going to hold you. But plants can only do so much, I think, is the biggest kind of thing. As your estrogen drops, estrogen's kind of given a bad rap most of the way through your life as making you moody and emotional, and those experiments where they give men estrogen and they just like lose it, or someone who's been on anabolic steroids and they have an estrogen crash and they just like, they're all of a sudden suicidal. And it's like, well, women have those high levels of estrogen all the time, but up until that point it's given, and then we can't, and then we like, it's gone, and don't have the cardiovascular support, so we start to get insulin resistance, and we start to get a little muffin top starts to develop, and we're storing more fat because we need that fat to aromatase more estrogen because we're so depleted. So it's like this smart process that the body's going through to produce more estrogen. But the plants will hold you, but they'll only go so far. So all of those adaptogens that are going to support your adrenals, what they'll do is they'll help to build your adrenal reserves, sure. But the tissue itself, like the adrenal glands themselves, if you just keep whipping them with adaptogens and just taking more rhodiola and taking more, of those kind of plants, they've done experiments where they've got like, mice to swim for extended periods of time, and they've given them ashwagandha or they've given them rhodiola, and then other ones are swimming without the adaptogens. And the ones that swim with the adaptogens obviously can swim hours longer than the ones that don't have those. But when they do the autopsy on them afterwards, they find that the adrenal glands are atrophied. They're completely destroyed. So they still deplete the tissue. So I think that we actually need to slow down, and we actually need to support our bodies. And yeah, once we get those first signs of perimenopause and we start to realize that our adrenals are not really coping and they're not making that transition, we use the plants to make the transition, and then we put things in place in our life and we start to change and we start to slow down. Like the children are sort of moving away and becoming more independent at that age, and our careers become a focus, I think, for some women at that age. But also, I think that we should be focusing on that other transition that we're making, and that we are supposed to be transitioning, and this opening that happens, and the more information that we're receiving, it's not just so we can use it for us, it's so that we can help our communities and we can contribute. So if we make time to receive that information and become aware of the content of our dreams, and we become the oracles we're meant to be as women at that particular time, then not only are we going to slow down and we're not going to need to just whip our adrenals to keep going, we're actually going to receive the messages that are coming through for us, because we're supposed to share this wisdom with our communities. So I think that's a really important part of making that transition into perimenopause, and it's definitely something I've been focusing on. And like I said, I've noticed dramatically during this time the difference in the quality of I've noticed the other side of it too. Like I've definitely gone through having to take sea buckthorn every day, so that if you take sea buckthorn for an extended period of time, you'll stop like those things like the vaginal atrophy that can happen and prevent that. And in the early stages, I think the first thing to happen is that your progesterone drops first. So you can take herbs to lift your progesterone, but then now I'm experiencing the estrogen starting to decline. So that's really about building my DHEA and building my adrenal reserves and starting to support that. And, you know, when I do it, the symptoms go away, and that the whole transition is better. But the other thing that has made a real impact for me is just the fatty acids. One, the sea buckthorn is a big part of it, but also by this age, we've had a lifetime of environmental toxins. So by this time, our cellular membranes have started to become depleted, and we're not detoxing
Mm-hmm.
properly. So a lot of what we're experiencing when we're asked to process all these hormones and make all these transitions, we're already at threshold. A lot of our cells are completely like a lot of those lipophilic toxins that are stored in our fat, those forever chemicals from cooking with the wrong pans and being exposed to heavy metals or glyphosates and pesticides that we can't get away from. A lot of that's stored in our fat. So phosphatidylcholine is predominantly makes up our fatty lipid layer around our cells. And because of the environmental toxin load, and the fact that our bile, which is responsible for clearing a lot of the hormones and clearing a lot of the toxins, is made up of phosphatidylcholine, our pool and our levels are so low that we don't have enough to repair our cellular membranes, and we don't have enough to start detoxing. So I take a liposomal phosphatidylcholine by Body Bio, and that has had a real impact in just the dryness of my skin and helping to I know it was clearing toxins because I experienced it, as I had to take a binder with it because I felt the toxin dump that was happening when I started to do it. But the seed oils that have accumulated just by eating takeout and, you know, being busy and ordering Uber Eats and thinking, oh, I ordered the healthier Uber Eats option, but really it's
Yeah,
still
no.
full of all the oxidized seed oils that are accumulating and can take 10 years to get out of your body from your childhood. So you can have lived all of your adult life really consciously and eaten all organic food and avoid seed oils, but you're still dealing with the exposure from childhood. So phosphatidylcholine and that product has been really, really beneficial during this transition.
Oh, that's wow. You are very knowledgeable, and I hope any lady who listening, please, ladies, if you're listening, I hope there's good information in there. Um, Number one point, I think, is just being aware. So number one, being aware that we are going to go through these changes. It doesn't happen, at the same time for all of us. So it's not like at age 40 we will experience that, at age 41 and then 42 and whatever. I'm 42,
Mm.
and I definitely started to experience, these things as well. And I'm definitely not as knowledgeable as you are when it comes to it, but I had to figure out certain things and started to learn about it, and because I really could feel it that okay, I still look okay and I feel okay, but I feel different. What the
Mm,
heck, And sometimes it can be very unpleasant. So
mm,
I started to learn about these things, and I learned that liver function affects our hormones
yeah,
big time. So that was
yeah.
one simple information. So I was running with that. And then I listened to interviews. There's a lady called, I think her name is Alicia Vitti, and she wrote the Woman Code, and
Mm-hmm.
I think In the Flow, it's the other book. And that was also
Mm-hmm.
very important to learn that in different phases of our cycle, we will have different needs and requirements. May it be,
Yeah,
like because everyone goes about like, eat your protein, eat cottage cheese. And you go like, oh, leave me alone with the cottage cheese already. It's like,
yeah,
it's more complex than that. I mean, nothing
yeah.
against the good cottage cheese, but it is more complex than that, and it's also not a one-sided thing, as you say, that herbal remedies and whatnot can really help us, but we need to start really taking care of our bodily function, as in like our liver function, kidney function, adrenal function, what we do, are we enabling our body to detox properly, to relax properly, because a
Yeah.
person who is emotionally regulated, not busy all the time, but they learn to self-care, and by the best meaning of the word, not just slapping on an eye patch and having a quick bubble bath, like really focusing on that. Maybe they meditate a little bit, so there's mental clarity. Then you can evaluate the process and the situation where you're at in the transition better than if you're fully
Mm,
exhausted and you're stressed out and you're hungry and you haven't slept and you haven't pooped for days. And that's
mm,
also a massive part of it. So I would definitely say is that like this really is time for us, if we haven't yet as women, to start turning that the intention, like the awareness and everything within, turn it towards ourselves. Because if we don't, in my opinion, it can lead to a very severe perimenopausal period in our lives that will make it a living hell for everybody else around us as well, including our
mm-hmm.
children. And
Yeah.
also, we will be very dysfunctional because we will have brain fog. We will
Mm,
have, you know what I mean? You will get hormonal breakouts, and you're going to go like, but I'm not a teenager. Why am I getting these? Or,
yeah.
you start losing your hair, for example, and you go like, oh my God, I'm going to be hideous. What's going to happen to me? So I
Yeah.
think it's also getting in touch with ourselves really is like, who am I now? What is my body?
Yeah.
What does my body need? What are my needs now? And meeting ourselves with love and acceptance at that time, and really
Mm,
being grateful for the fact that on Earth, not many species experience menopause. There's only a
mhm.
handful of species who experience menopause because
Yeah.
nature wants to preserve the wisdom and the strength and the capability of the woman who is no longer at childbearing age. And I think
Yeah.
this is a beautiful gift, really.
Yeah. It is. I agree.
So
100%.
thank you so much. And you've been so wonderful and wise. And honestly, I really enjoyed our talk. And I hope that anyone who's listening, ladies, and also if we get a couple of guys popping in, please be interested. Okay. This is for you as well to expand your knowledge.
Yeah.
But once again, I thank you, Tanya, for being here with me today. And I hope to talk with you very, very soon.